Right now, the town council in Fountain Hills cuts off public comment. Can they do that? And could other councils follow their lead?
Also on Sunday Square Off, an unusually high rejection rate for voters' mail-in ballots in November is raising concerns about the 2026 vote. President Trump calls for the death penalty after Senator Mark Kelly and other lawmakers post a video speaking directly to service members. Who's out of line here? Why Republicans are accusing Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs of taking credit for President Trump's tax cuts.
They voted for order and to prevent chaos, and frankly, that's kind of how it's supposed to work.
I do not understand how you think you can do your job as mayor and council if you are not hearing from the citizens you were elected to represent.
The word contentious doesn't begin to describe the Fountain Hills Town Council meeting this past week. There were several stoppages, and critics of the council plan to end public comment had to wait hours to speak. In the end, in what might be a first here in the Valley, the council voted 5-2 to end public comment that isn't related to a specific item on the agenda. So, can the town council do that? I'm putting the question to Taylor Seeley of the Arizona Republic. She covers First Amendment issues, which is what this controversy is all about. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thanks for having me.
You have a fairly unique beat. You cover the First Amendment. What kind of stories have you written about that?
I do have a unique beat. It's been extremely fun, interesting stories. I've written a lot about challenges over what books can be in school libraries, public libraries. I've written about whether panhandling is protected speech under the First Amendment. So it's a huge range.
Good to hear, and I enjoy reading your coverage. So tell us exactly what the council did in Fountain Hills.
So this week we saw the Fountain Hills Council permanently end public comment. This was in response to the threat of a lawsuit that they received. So the week after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the council members and the members of the public discussed that killing in really stark language. The council members were condemning the death, condemning the killing, but really began to vilify the political left activists for doing this as demons. They started discussing their faith, saying, take comfort in the fact that if you call upon the Lord for salvation, he will save you and you will be reunited with Kirk. Another council member had said, we hope that we all could be as obedient to the Lord as Kirk. A resident thought that this was a violation of the government prohibition on establishing a religion. She threatened to sue. You see the town council this week in response decide if this is going to risk litigation for us, we'll just end it altogether.
So two First Amendment rights in there, free speech and freedom of religion. And a resident filed the notice of claim. You spoke to several First Amendment experts about this. What did they say about the religious piece?
So that's an interesting discussion. When it comes to the religious aspect of this, there's a case that we look at, Town of Greece versus Galloway. That case, the justices found, the U.S. Supreme Court justices found that legislative prayer at a town meeting does not violate the Establishment Clause. But they did concede that if government officials were developing a pattern of denigrating non-believers or religious minorities, if they were threatening damnation, preaching conversion, that could be a violation. The resident is claiming that that's what happened. Now, what could throw a dent in that argument is the fact that the council members were really pointedly rebuking the political left. They were invoking religious symbolism, demons in doing that, but the First Amendment expert that I spoke to had said, well, politicians can denigrate someone for their politics, and they can invoke religious symbolism in doing so. That's not necessarily a First Amendment violation.
So you can call someone a demon or even worse in religious terms.
As long as it's not, oh my gosh, these Muslims or members of the Baha'i faith, they should really convert to this religion or that religion because they're demons. That would be, I think, running afoul. But yeah, if you're just criticizing someone on their politics, that's fair game. And
I want to step back for a sec. Folks might wonder, why is this going on in Fountain Hills? It's Joe Arpaio's home. David Schweiker, Congressman David Schweiker lives there. It's a pretty strong Republican community. But there's been a shift on this council. in recent
Absolutely.
years, hasn't there?
The ideological tilt of that council has shifted farther right. The last election was one of the most kind of vitriolic in the town's history, and that vitriol has just continued. Even people who had been formerly aligned, Councilmember Brenda Kalivianakis with the others on the majority, they were once aligned, and now they are very much divided.
And so what about the free speech rights of the public, the residents there? Don't they have a right to show up, stand at a microphone, and say anything they want to this council that pertains to Fountain Hills?
Actually, they do not. There is no legal obligation for government bodies to provide public comment.
No right at all?
No. What the right is for residents is that if they do provide that forum, the government cannot discriminate based on your viewpoint. So they couldn't, for example, pass a policy to say, here's public comment, but by the way, don't bring your religious faith into that comment. They could not do that.
But in this case, they can limit it to whatever's on the agenda and just to that.
Correct. So this elimination of public comment is for the general public comment, which is at most town councils before or at the end of the meeting. It's where you discuss anything that's important to you, typically within the council's jurisdiction. But when it comes to items that the council is voting on or discussing, there will still be public comment for those.
And state law is silent on this?
Correct. So there's no state law obligating public comment. Perhaps if residents felt this were, conspicuous, they could request that, but there is nothing presently.
And I think you've done a check of what's going on in other communities here in the Valley. How unusual is this in Fountain Hills, what they've done?
It is unusual. We have seen attempts in other cities. Last year, Glendale City Council made a similar attempt to stop airing public comment on its streaming platform. Residents rebuked that swiftly, fiercely, calling it censorship, and you saw the council back off.
So, do you think what Fountain Hills is doing might embolden other communities to do the same thing?
I don't think that there's reason to think that because, as I mentioned, when other councils have considered it, the backlash has been so swift and vehement that it has typically led to kind of a rescinding of that policy. Fountain Hills council members themselves, the night of the vote, left the door open to bring it back, reconsider. So I won't be surprised if we see that, particularly if council receives continued feedback against it.
All right. Taylor Seeley, thanks so much for your insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.